Welcome back. After the break, you're watching Indus News, and I'm Fiza Jamal bringing you our main stories in detail. 32 government coalition soldiers have been killed in a Houthi missile attack on a military parade in Yemen's port city of Aden. A pro-government military official says a commander is among the killed. Houthi rebels say that they launched a medium-range ballistic missile and an armed drone at the parade. They claimed the military parade was making an advance on Taiz and Dalia provinces in the southwest of the country. Separately, a suicide attack on a police station in the city's Omar al-Mukhtar neighborhood killed 3 soldiers and wounded 20 others. United States has imposed financial sanctions against Iran's foreign minister, Javad Zarif. The Treasury Department says Zarif's assets in America have been frozen. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin accused Zarif of implementing the agenda of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini. He said the sanctions send a clear message to Tehran. Its recent behavior is completely unacceptable. Zarif called the sanctions preposterous, claiming he has no property or interests outside of Iran. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani called the move Washington's childish behavior. Meanwhile, the United States has decided not to block Iran's civilian nuclear cooperation with Russia, China, and European countries. National Security Advisor John Bolton announced the 90-day extension in the waiver of sanctions which prohibit the cooperation. In another related development, Iran is ready to talk to Saudi Arabia if the kingdom is also willing to do so. In an interview, Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif said Iran has never closed doors to dialogue. Tensions in the Gulf have spiked since Saudi Arabia accused Iran of attacking ships in the Strait of Hormuz in June. Iran has rejected the allegations. Meanwhile, Iran and the United Arab Emirates have held talks on maritime security amid a spike in tensions in the Gulf. Officials from both countries met in Tehran and discussed issues related to border security and navigation in shared waters. United States has strongly criticized Germany for its refusal to join the Pentagon's naval mission in the Strait of Hormuz. Ambassador Richard Grenell says Europe's biggest economy must assume more global responsibility. Talking to German media, Grenell slammed contradictory statements from Berlin authorities. He said one minister spoke of considering the request, while another minister rejected it. Earlier, German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas ruled out participation in the United States' proposed naval mission. He said there is no military solution to the crisis in the Persian Gulf. The 13th round of the international Astana talks to resolve the Syrian conflict have begun in Kazakhstan. Iran, Turkey, and Russia, with representatives of the Syrian government and opposition, are taking part. The government delegation is headed by Syria's representative to United Nations, Bashar al-Jafari. The Kazakh foreign minister says delegations from Iraq and Lebanon will attend as observers. Technical consultations will be held today, while the plenary session will take place tomorrow. Earlier, Syria's government and rebels exchanged prisoners ahead of the talks as confidence-building measures. The Kazakh Foreign Ministry says the results of the two-day talks will be made public. Turkey has ramped up its military presence at the Syrian border after threatening to launch a full-scale operation across the boundary. Armored vehicles and commando units have been dispatched to the border province of Sanliurfa. A 12-vehicle military convoy accompanied by Gendarmerie forces has arrived in the province's Ceylanpınar district. Ankara has been pushing the United States to finalize and implement a safe zone near its border with Syria. Last month, President Tayyip Erdogan threatened to take matters into his own hands if the zone was not established. United States says it has never asked Southeast Asian nations to choose side in Washington-Beijing tensions. Speaking at the ASEAN Foreign Ministers Conference, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said United States seeks relations based on mutual interests. On the sidelines of the event, Pompeo also met his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi to discuss ways to stabilize bilateral relations. Wang said it is important for China and United States to meet face-to-face and cooperate, no matter how grave the matter might be. The Southeast Asian Foreign Ministers meeting was dominated by the South China Sea crisis and US-China trade war. And we move on. Beijing says Chinese and United States negotiators discussed the principles for their next round of talks during a meeting in Shanghai. The two sides have agreed to meet again in September, concluding a brief round of trade talks yesterday. Ministry spokesperson Gao Feng said the officials also discussed the reasons why previous trade talks broke down. Feng said China and United States can end their trade row if the concerns of both sides are taken into account. United States Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin represented Washington. China's Vice Premier Liu He was Beijing's top negotiator in the talks. United States has offered assistance to Russia in putting out wildfires in Siberia. US President Donald Trump called Putin to discuss the wildfires that have consumed over 3 million hectares. The Kremlin said Putin sees Trump's offer as a hint at the restoration of full-format bilateral relations. Putin expressed gratitude to Trump for his offer and said the military has been called to fight the blaze. The first military transport aircraft has arrived in Krasnoyarsk to join the operation. The majority of Siberian fires are raging in remote or inaccessible areas, making rescue operations complicated. And Russia's beekeepers are rallying against the use of pesticides that are decimating the country's bee population. Hundreds of beekeepers across Russia say their bees are dying in large numbers, robbing them of their livelihood. More in this report.
Anatoly Rubtsov was miserable to find only a faint buzz in hives after his bees were poisoned, probably by a pesticide. Rubtsov estimates his losses at $25,000 for over 3 million dead bees. People around Bobrovka are certain the culprit is a local company growing rapeseed. It is a cash crop with yellow flowers used for cooking oil, cattle feed, and biofuel. The company treated its fields with insecticides on July the 4th. A lab in Moscow eventually confirmed the presence on the rapeseed plants of fipronil, which is banned in the EU.
The pesticides banned in Europe have all been dumped here in Russia, and farmers use them in their fields because it is cheap. As a result, bees are dying and people are being poisoned. Of course, somebody has to take responsibility for this, but I don't know if someone will.
Russia's agriculture watchdog confirmed the bee deaths were caused by uncontrolled use of insecticides. The watchdog says the chemicals and their use are not being monitored closely.
We had a clean and ecological place. Then farmers began to work in these fields, and now we are told that it is dangerous to come here.
After the loss of their hives, beekeepers will simply quit, as with no government support, the occupation becomes unsustainable.
Iraqi Prime Minister Abdul Mahdi has issued an order to rein in popular mobilization forces. The groups have been rendered illegal after the deadline given to all paramilitary forces to merge with the army passed. Iraq's Prime Minister told the paramilitary groups to either integrate with government forces or surrender their weapons. The popular mobilization forces have appealed to extend the time limit for the next 2 months. The country has been under pressure from Washington to control irregular forces amid the threat they pose to United States interests. Meanwhile, 7 security forces members have been killed and 16 others wounded in 2 separate ISIS attacks. Police say 5 were killed in Salahuddin province, while 2 were hit by mortars in Kurdistan. Islamabad has offered consular access to the Indian spy Kulbhushan Jadhav, who was caught infiltrating into Pakistani territory. This comes after International Court of Justice on July the 17th asked Islamabad to provide New Delhi access to Jadhav. Foreign Office spokesman Dr. Mohammad Faisal says India can have the access starting tomorrow. Faisal says New Delhi has not yet responded over the matter. Jadhav, a serving Indian Navy commander working for Indian spy agency RAW, was arrested in March 2016 from Balochistan. Jadhav confessed to crimes of multiple accounts of terrorism and espionage. Well, now it's time for us to take a short break, but don't go anywhere because coming up after the break, welcome back after the break. We'll continue with our main stories in detail. United States envoy Zalmay Khalilzad has arrived in Pakistan to discuss progress in the Afghan peace process. The visit comes ahead of negotiations to end the Afghan war with the Taliban in Doha this week. Before arriving in Islamabad, Khalilzad said he completed the most productive visit to Kabul since he took the job. The envoy added that if the Taliban do their part, United States will do its and successfully conclude the agreement. Meanwhile, Foreign Office spokesperson Dr. Faisal said Pakistan is working sincerely for peace in Afghanistan. Faisal said Islamabad is hoping for a constructive meeting with Khalilzad, but no one should prejudge the outcome of talks. United States Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction has identified thousands of ghost soldiers in Kabul's army. The massive corruption was revealed after the implementation of a biometric ID system for soldiers. The SIGAR report said almost 42,000 troops being paid for do not exist in reality. The report said the change was part of an effort by United States to reduce opportunities for corrupt Afghan army officials. The development comes as Washington mulls over a strategy of United States troop withdrawal from the war-torn country. Denmark says it will resume taking refugees under the UNHCR quota system starting this year. This decision comes after a 3-year-long hiatus by Copenhagen amid global concerns at the rising migrant crisis. In a statement, the Danish government said it will start with a small group of refugees who require medical assistance. It said the migrant selection will be a multi-step process before the refugee status of an individual is confirmed. The government said it will start accepting a larger number of refugees from next year. United Nations Humanitarian Agency has praised Denmark's decision. And Italy has allowed 116 rescued migrants on its Gregoretti Coast Guard ship to disembark. Interior Minister Matteo Salvini's statement came after European Union countries agreed to share responsibility to look after them. Several migrants aboard the vessel have already been evacuated for medical attention. The migrants were picked up by Italian patrols after they set off from Libya in 2 boats. They were later transferred to the Coast Guard ship. Bruno Gregoretti, Italian prosecutors, also opened an investigation into the living conditions of migrants on the ship. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has urged political parties in Northern Ireland to step up their efforts to form a power-sharing government. During meetings with the region's main parties, Johnson reiterated his determination to split with the European Union. This report has the details.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says restoring the power-sharing government in Northern Ireland is his top priority. Johnson has called for Ireland to scrap the border backstop clause in the deal negotiated under his predecessor Theresa May.
My prime focus this morning is to do everything I can to help that get up and running again, because I think that's profoundly in the interest of people here, all the citizens here in Northern Ireland, and I'll be helping the parties in any way I can to get that going and over the line. I expect Brexit may come up a little bit. I don't rule that out.
Johnson met the leaders of Northern Ireland's 5 main political parties. In an interview, Sinn Féin leader Mary Lou MacDonald called for a border poll in case of a no-deal Brexit. She warned Johnson that leaving without a deal would be catastrophic for the 1998 peace deal that ended 3 decades of violence in the province.
So we have met with Boris Johnson. We've had a fairly extensive conversation with him in which we have raised the issue of Brexit, his course of action, which seems to us to indicate that he has set the compass for a disorderly and a crash Brexit.
After meeting the British Prime Minister, Democratic Unionist Party's Arlene Foster said a deal over the border issue can be achieved.
And now we talk about India, where 6 people have been killed in heavy rains inundating the Indian state of Gujarat. The monsoon has wreaked havoc across South Asia, killing over 680 people since early July. In the city of Vadodara, government officials say 442 millimeters of rain fell in just 12 hours on Wednesday. 22 trains were cancelled in Gujarat, while Vadodara's airport has also been closed till Friday. This year's monsoon has hit India hardest, with over 470 people dying across the country. A 1-year-old girl has become the 3rd patient to test positive for Ebola in Democratic Republic of Congo's eastern city of Goma. Medics say she is the daughter of the 2nd patient who died earlier this week. Health officials and aid workers have expressed concern that the virus can establish a foothold in the densely populated urban center. Goma's first Ebola case was detected in mid-July. Since then, the World Health Organization has warned that the disease can accelerate. Congo is taking steps to counter Ebola with the help of the AU and United Nations. A total of 1,803 lives have been lost in the 2nd worst Ebola outbreak this year. A senior United Nations official appealed to the international community not to turn its back on Yemen. UNDP Administrator Achim Steiner said in an interview 4 years of conflict have set Yemen back by 20 years. Speaking to media in Amman, Steiner said United Nations received less than 36% of funding pledged at a Geneva conference in February. According to United Nations, 24 million Yemenis depend on some form of humanitarian or protection assistance for survival.
This is a major logistical operation, just in terms of bringing the food into the country when ports are not functioning properly, when there is still ongoing disputes and fighting, where our own staff often face literally a risk to their lives, and to then arrange the distribution in the country also.
The world body has warned that millions of Yemenis are on the verge of famine, while essential health, education, and other services have collapsed. Moving on, the Netherlands and Switzerland have suspended their funding to United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees. The holdup comes after an ethics report criticized alleged mismanagement and abuse of authority. The internal report includes allegations of misconduct and discrimination by high-level officials in the region. The Dutch government has asked United Nations Agency in Palestine for clarification. The United Nations Commissioner General in Palestine, Pierre Crown-Bol, has denied the allegations. Crown-Bol has requested the donors to continue their funding for the refugees. Now let's find out what's going on in the world of business. Stocks in Asia and Europe have fallen after the U.S. Central Bank dampens hopes for a string of rate cuts. The United States Federal Reserve Bank cut rates by 25 basis points, citing global developments and muted inflation as reasons. The stock market sold off aggressively after Chairman Jerome Powell said the cuts were just a mid-cycle adjustment. Japan's Nikkei and Australia's ASX 200 slipped marginally. Mainland Chinese stocks fell as a private survey showed Chinese factory activity contracted in July. Hong Kong's Hang Seng is in negative territory, while South Korea's Kospi traded almost flat. In Europe, FTSE 100 declined as traders are awaiting the Bank of England's monetary policy meeting. Oil prices fell more than $1, declining for the first time in 6 days after the Fed Bank announced rate cuts. At the Pan American Games in Peru, Canada have won the gold medal in the women's artistic swimming finals. Mexico secured silver, while United States took bronze. The Canadians finished on top with a total of 180.03 points. The Mexicans were 6 points behind the winners, while United States managed 170. Meanwhile, in basketball's preliminary round match, Argentina have defeated Uruguay by 102 points to 65. Power forward Gabriel Deck scored 23 points to dominate Uruguay's defense. Liverpool coach Jurgen Klopp and players Mohamed Salah, Sadio Mane and Virgil van Dijk are heading nominations for the FIFA Best Awards. Klopp led Liverpool and the vital trio of players to the Champions League's trophy. Liverpool also finished second behind Manchester City in the Premier League. Juventus striker Cristiano Ronaldo and Barcelona's Lionel Messi also make the shortlist for the men's award. American Alex Morgan and Jill Ellis will be favorites for the female player and coach awards, the best FIFA awards that will be presented in Milan on September 23rd. Also, football's global governing body, FIFA, has announced it will expand the Women's World Cup from 24 teams to 32. The increase will put the women's tournament at par with the men's. FIFA says it has made the decision following the success of this year's World Cup in France. The tournament has increased the number of teams from 12 to 24 teams in the last two editions. The governing body has also revealed the bidding process to host the 23 World Cup. It said 9 countries are expected to submit bids when the process opens on October the 4th this year. Well, the monsoon rains are hitting Lahore as well, but let's see what the weather is looking like today around the globe. These are all the main stories I have for you this hour. You can also choose to keep tabs on all of our social media. Just find us online by the name indus.news.